All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from your respective time zones. 8:31 p.m. IST. That's what I can see on my mobile, although I'm sitting in Peru, northern Peru at the moment. So for me, it's early morning. But anyways, so welcome back to the Entrepreneurship Gyan TEG talk. As we started 2 years back, in fact, it's a special event because 2 years back when we started in July 2023, in fact, on July 27th, we had the inaugural TEG talk, which was by Mr. Ramanan Ramanathan, another ITB alumni, and we started with him, former mission director and first mission director of Atal Innovation Mission. And and again today we have Dr. Ram Bala, uh, Professor Ram Bala, because he's an academic guy per se, so another ITB alumni for the 22nd TEG talk, and as we have been doing, we have been focusing on a mix of what I usually call to my colleagues as paper, practice, and policy. So paper is the academic side, and then practice is basically, guys in the startup or the business world. And policy, we had a couple of people who are, associated with the policy making and decision making and all those things. So we are trying to bring in kind of speakers who are a mix from paper, practice, and policy. And Professor Ram would be kind of a mix of all three, rather I would say paper and practice, because he also has a startup and he would be talking about it. But the idea has been what I kind of keep repeating, that to have a platform where budding entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs have an a platform for seeking help, seeking advice, looking for some kind of collaborations, looking for some kind of knowledge, wisdom, or gyan, as we are saying it, but also not only young entrepreneurs in terms young as the age, but anyone who is getting started up and might look for some veteran entrepreneurs or business leaders to connect, raise fund opportunities and things like that. We have a Telegram group for startup and entrepreneurship, SIG, which I've been leading for ITB alumni, but also an active global WhatsApp group, now more than 1,000+ people, where people are actively seeking those synergies, and which is kind of what we planned 2 years back when we started. And so that's there, and we have a set of mentors, as we are calling them, who have helped us in this journey right from the very beginning. And one of the mentors is us here, Rishi, who is helping us co-hosting these events, by the way. So he will be formally introducing Professor Ram in a while. But yeah, that's the kind of idea that we have this platform, we keep going. So to you, Rishi, to please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Weber. Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone, wherever you may be. I'm Rishikesh Satamane, a 1997 graduate from IIT Bombay. My connection with our alma mater is strong, and I have the privilege of serving as a past president of IIT Bombay Heritage Founders Bay Area chapter for 2 years. My term expired last year. But currently, I balance my role as a fractional CMO for various startups, as well as on the board of IIT Bay Area and IIT Startups. So it's a distinct pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ram Bala. I connected with him back in 2020, and he is such a gem of fellow. I not only share IIT Bombay alumnus with him, but also UCLA Anderson. Amazing, both awesome institutes, and Dr. Ram truly exemplifies the excellence that's coming out of these institutions. So Dr. Bala is an associate professor of AI and analytics at Santa Clara University's Levi School of Business and a co-author of the forward-thinking book, The AI Center Enterprise, just released last week. He is a world-renowned researcher applying advanced techniques like optimization, game theory, and machine learning to revolutionizing pricing, marketplace design, and supply chain decisions in dynamic markets. His current work is at the cutting edge of how organizations are transitioning to AI-driven autonomous operations. Beyond just the academic relief, Ram is a passionate builder. He thrives on leveraging analytics, data science, and AI to craft solutions that drive better business decisions. He advised numerous teams, from nimble startups to Fortune 500 giants, and founded Project Stanley, a nonprofit using data science to tackle humanitarian challenges. Ram's journey also includes impactful roles as chief data scientist at Grand Canals and leading data science initiatives at Adela. Today, he continues to shape the future of AI in business, co-leading the Prometheus Lab and co-founding Samvid, an agentic AI startup poised to transform enterprise collaboration. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to a visionary at the forefront of AI innovation, Dr. Ram Bala.
Thank you so much, Rishi, for that glorious introduction, and Vaibhav, of course, for inviting me, organizing this IITB Alumni Association. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you might be. It is a rare privilege and honor to be invited by your alma mater and to present before such a wonderful group. Let me actually share my screen and because I do have a set of slides to share. So I know that we are all inundated with talk about AI, Gen AI, but maybe there are times when we get a little jaded. But I hope that in this conversation I can sort of push the boundaries a little and think beyond what we are doing right now and look towards the future, right? And maybe start thinking about what are the steps that we can start taking right now in towards that future, right? And so it's about sort of Gen AI and the enterprise, very focused on sort of this is something how companies work, how they're going to change, how they're going to transform is something that I've been very passionate about. So obviously, this is very focused on that and in the context of Gen AI. So a little bit, just to give you sort of a personal touch to my background. Other than the fact, my basic background from IIT Bombay and UCLA, and the research that I've been doing, what really changed in my sort of journey? I think a lot of it was about what happened nearly about a decade ago, when I was really bitten by the environment around me. There was also this need where I felt I'd done a lot of research in these areas, and I really wanted to start thinking about how I can apply that research to different practical problems. And that's what got me involved in the startup ecosystem. I became chief scientist at an early stage startup called Grand Canals on the e-commerce logistics analytics space, which was acquired by C.H. Robinson, the largest logistics brokerage in North America. Eventually, while I was there, COVID happened, and that led to sort of like my foray into non-profit startups. Essentially, Project Stanley is a non-profit that I founded during the COVID era, again with the mission of using data science and AI to actually solve humanitarian problems. And we solved a bunch of problems related to medical supplies, job market matching, and so on. That led me to becoming the head of AI at Andela. Andela is a SoftBank and Chan Zuckerberg initiative funded startup. Where I built the AI team. That was when I began to understand the power of unstructured data, natural language data, and so on. I had not done a lot of work in that area before that. And that led me to this journey where a couple of years ago, when large language models became so prominent, it really started giving me the opportunity to start thinking about how this would revolutionize the future. And I co-founded and I am a chief AI scientist at Samvid, and which is actively sort of building right now. In all of this, I think the important thing is which combines sort of my academic life and my startup life is the book that was just released in retail this week, and it already is sort of a bestseller in some of these categories: artificial intelligence, e-commerce, even business ethics, which sort of surprised me, but I guess there was enough in that, enough we had about sort of the ethical implementation of AI in the book that it really sort of became very popular in that as well. I will talk more about a lot of the themes I will talk about today are related to this book. And so, and then how I'm thinking about, applying it in practice through the startup. It also hopefully will encourage for you to think about sort of some of these themes and how these can be applied, right? The focus is really going to be on transformation of companies using AI. What does it imply for startups? Well, for startups, they are going to be an important conduit for how do we actually address this transformation. Startups are going to be critical in addressing that transformation for larger companies, small to medium-sized companies, legacy companies, and so on. And when I talk about companies, I'm talking about the entire spectrum. And all kinds of, not just tech companies, all kinds of legacy companies. The kinds of companies I'm working with today are companies that have never even thought about AI, till now. And but turns out that this is a unique point in time where we can actually apply these things, right? All right, enough about the meta level background. Let's actually get to some of the specifics here, right? What is the fundamental motivation? So when I think about what I've been doing for a very long time, optimization, machine learning, and applying it to business problems, traditionally the problems that we were best at solving were things like design the supply chain network, optimize ad campaigns, figure out what the size of your workforce needs to be to actually accomplish a task. And whenever we would build these tools, implement them in practice, my challenge always was that they would be a fancy little tool for somebody to use at the beginning, but often usage would drop over time. And we would, there is this, what is called as a POC graveyard, right? I think we would implement things and they would never ever gain widespread acceptance, except in a few rare cases. And this was a challenge that I thought, why was this happening? What's the real issue here? Turns out that the manager's job doesn't just end with generating a number to actually sort of, hang your hat on. It is often when you generate sort of an optimal number or a predicted number for something, it's the beginning of many of the other implications in any organization. It's the beginning of all the legal implications. Potentially there are contracts that you have which actually specify whether you can implement this or not. Potentially there is HR policy that determines whether you can implement something or not. Potentially there are team member opinions which may differ from what your thought process is, and there are change management issues in actually making this happen. So durable adoption of management science, as we call it, is incredibly hard in companies. And so how do we address this given all of these other implications? What I realized during all of this experience was that the main reason we are not able to do this is because traditional, and when I say traditional, I'm talking about not too far back, I'm talking about pre-large language model world or LLM world. Traditional LLM optimization does not work well with language. To give you a very simple example, if I make a statement, the server fell down, right? What does this mean? Now, we live in such a strong tech world that we are so much exposed to tech that whenever I ask this question in sort of like a more in-person forum, the first answer I'll always get is a computer server fell down or a computer server went down, right? And I'm like, is that the only context? If I was sitting in a restaurant and somebody told me the server fell down, right? The answer to that question would be, well, the person who was supposed to serve me my food fell down, right? We just finished Wimbledon, right? And Novak Djokovic actually lost the semifinal. And if I were tracking that and they said the server fell down, the first thing that would come to my mind is this, right? Which means that the tennis server fell down, in this case, Djokovic. And well, if you're in a tech context, that still applies. The computer server fell down and it broke and a bunch of things happened, right? So context is king, right? Without knowing exactly what context you're in, natural language doesn't you cannot clarify the true meaning of or true intent of natural language. But we now have the tools to start on this journey, and we'll talk about what else we need to actually make all of this happen. Now, think about how managers make decisions. It's all about context. It's all about sort of whether it's a legal context, an HR context, or whatever other context might be, which is full of natural language, which till now has inhibited the way we actually make decisions in using some of these more sophisticated tools. So how do we enable this to happen? But the first takeaway from all of this is, and I'll have three takeaways through this talk, is the first takeaway is that understanding context based on unstructured data is central to organizational decision making. I think we have to start from this premise because this is pervasive. Without tackling the problem of unstructured data, we cannot use these tools to better understand organizational decision making, better enable or help organizational decision making. But today we have the opportunity with modern large language model tools. We are at the beginning of this journey where we can actually start tackling this problem in a serious way. Let's get to the next point. So we're all, if you're all on the same page that understanding or really tackling the unstructured data problem is crucial to organizational decision making, the next step is how do we scale this up? And to this, I will appeal to Andrew Ng's famous statement that AI is the new electricity. And he also made the statement in the pre-LLM world, right? And I would have said the same thing. But what does it actually mean in the world that we are currently living in, right? This idea that AI is the new electricity and actually can transform industries. Let's go back to electricity, right? That's an area that, in history and how it was actually implemented. If you look at the history of electricity, the very first applications were almost trivial, very simple, right? For almost 50 years, it was used for applications like electroplating. And then it moved to like moving small railroad cars, very slow, right? Even when they finally started implementing things, it was almost always about, taking, let's say, a steam powered device, replacing with an electric motor, right? And it was all about keeping the same existing layout of the facility, of the factory, of the way we do our work, and just replacing individual components and making them more efficient, right? So these were largely, localized efficiency improving devices, right? That's how electric devices were. If we think about AI today, this has the sort of same flavor, right? If you think about all the applications we are implementing, we are looking at, let's say, a customer service application. Let's say we are looking at a very specific application in supply chains. And we think about how to improve that using AI, right? And so the idea here is replacing existing systems and processes and making them more efficient. But that's not the same as changing the entire layout of the factory that I talked about, right? That's not something that happened initially even with electricity. That's not happening here either. We are not really embedding it in the workflow of an organization and trying to see how we can actually improve it, right? And that's beginning to happen, and we'll talk about the journey of how this is going to happen, but it's not really happening at a full scale. So that really is the direction we need to go in. Again, when we look back at electricity and we think about how exactly that happened in that journey, in history, right? So first of all, if you think about what we're doing today, we are creating what I call as AI-enabled organizations, right? Embedding them in workflows is what we call as AI-centered organizations. I'll come back to that in a minute. But to appeal to what happened in history, what really revolutionized the use of electricity was a distribution of electricity through wires. This allowed industrialists like Ford to start rethinking layouts, rethinking how exactly assembly line, create the first assembly line production techniques, right? And so once you start rethinking how the processes should work, and they started building them around the way electricity was distributed or had the potential to be distributed, the power of electricity really became clear, right? And so now today we use it in a way that can actually sort of, that is completely, the way we work has completely changed because of electricity. Yeah. What can we do with AI in the same way? So let's think about that. So today we are talking about increasing individual efficiency, looking at sort of, a task that an individual might do, improving that using AI. But I really think the power of this is going to start coming in the interactions. Let's think about some example interactions, right? Think about sort of a demand planning process. A demand planning process in any business-to-business organization, manufacturing organization, for example, is not so simple. You can't just simply throw some predictive models at some data and get some answer. Often it is a collaborative effort, right? There are predictive models on historical data that the manufacturing planning organization might pull together or the finance team might pull together. But then there will be this local, there will be this real-time market intelligence that only a salesperson has, The salesperson had a conversation with somebody, like, with a customer. The customer said, hey, I'm expecting like a burst in demand, or I'm expecting like a decline in the market. I believe that maybe potentially, tariffs might be coming in, that might change things. There's all this information that's coming through, right? And that information then enters a collaborative process where people that sit around the table, get on Zoom calls, start discussing exactly how these numbers are going to get affected. And then there is this chaos, right? Almost, where you start exchanging spreadsheets, exchanging information, exchanging a lot of these, and having all these conversations, and which also get, which move in different directions depending on different people's viewpoints of the problem. And so those interactions are, there is so much information and value in those interactions, which can now be enabled, turbocharged, made smoother, made frictionless using AI. Once you start improving those interactions, and this could be between, let's say, a manufacturing planner or a finance team and a sales team, it could be between a product manager and a designer, it could be between maybe even across organizations, right? You're trying to procure something from your supplier. And so once you start improving that interaction quality, reducing those interaction costs, you start unlocking new mechanisms of value. You start throwing in more people into this process. What you're really moving towards is almost a marketplace of ideas. A marketplace of ideas which can start discovering new sources of value. It is that connection that you never thought of. It is that sort of like, new direction that was just discussed offhand, is basically then captured, and a pattern is detected, and then you're able to discover new value. Right? That is the true AI-centered enterprise that we envision as part of the book, that I believe is the direction that all companies will start moving towards, right? And for this, and now for the first time, I'll actually start talking a little bit more about the technology. What we need is the idea of context-aware AI, right? And what do I mean by context-aware AI? Context-aware AI is AI that can understand both content as well as intent, right? So let me give an example. And the two pieces of context-aware AI are perception and reasoning, which we will definitely have to apply in addition to structured data or unstructured data, natural language data, image data, and so on. So let me give you a simple example. Think of a standard supplier agreement, right? Now, somebody in the operations team might want to look at the supplier agreement and this person's intent is to really figure out what's going to happen to like delivery schedules, how, what kind of pricing am I getting, what quantity discounts are available, how does it actually change the operation of the business, right? How does it change what kind of customer service level I can deliver to my end customers? Legal, on the other hand, may have a different view of that exact same document. The legal may want to analyze that same document for its risks and liabilities. What legal risks do we have? Are we going to get? Is there a threat of getting sued by somebody? Is that what other legal things do we need to worry about? So two very different perspectives, two very different intentions. So the content is exactly the same, right? Which means that same content has to be parsed, first of all, from a perception standpoint, a little differently, and then because the key things that they're looking for might be different, and then the reasoning over that has to essentially match the people who actually are the intent of the people who are looking at it, right? And so it's perception and reasoning. And what does this really map to? Perception is about recognizing information with clarity, reasoning about drawing conclusions from that information. Now, in this, we directly appeal to, and so perception is automatic and instinctive. Large language models have definitely started with that very idea. How can we instinctively perceive natural language data, for example? And then there is the conscious part, which now some of them are getting to, where we talk about reasoning, chain of thought, all of that. And there are many different directions you can go in, where enhancing context might actually help you reason better. This directly maps to the system 1, system 2 thinking that Daniel Kahneman, actually, was one of the greatest psychologists ever, who ended up winning a Nobel Prize in economics, founder of the field of behavioral economics. In his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, he talks about this notion of system 1 and system 2 thinking. This directly maps to that. This idea that you perceive instinctively and then you reason over that information in a deliberate and conscious way, right? To give you like a very simple example, think of like two different robots, one robot which can see the ball with clarity, and the other robot which can actually calculate the trajectory of the ball with clarity by applying a set of rules, let's say Newton's laws, for example, right? And if they work together, you essentially have a system that can actually be very, very powerful in solving many important problems. What does this mean for an organization? So for an organization, what it means is that the individual decision makers' role in the organization and how they operate changes completely. For example, right now you have what I call task-based AI located in different parts of the organization, right? And somebody might be using that to improve their tasks, right? In this case, the tick mark is attached to, let's say, a key decision maker, right? The challenge right now is that they are located in the silo, and so they are not able to always, except for a few occasions, actually, when they interact with somebody from a different, let's say, department or some other context, they're not able to necessarily get information which might help them do their job better, which might clarify their job better, right? The AI-centered enterprise is really about understanding the patterns in the organization across different cross-functional areas, and being able to sort of then act as a mediator across different parts of the organization, right? Which means your decisions now get made not just based on sort of the local silo you have, but actually and the overarching sort of information that's actually available, which might be relevant to you, and clarify that using artificial intelligence. Now, to give you a very simple example, right? In a hospital, for example, when nurses actually come up with a preoperative plan, and there are companies actually tackling this problem, when nurses come up with a preoperative plan for a surgery, they have to coordinate across many different sources. They have to coordinate with the surgeons, they have to coordinate with the patients on exactly what the custom plan is. They have to coordinate with sort of other technical staff. And think of this key decision maker here is a nurse who has to come up with a preoperative plan. Right now, the burden is very heavy. Instead, if you have a centralized AI system, which is basically able to sort of flag the important things, these doctors actually have these requirements. This patient actually has these set of issues which need to be incorporated into this plan, then they won't miss things. It's not that they're not doing that right now, but right now this process involves a lot of effort from their perspective. And how do we make their life better, and how do we actually sort of then enable them to actually spend more time with patients, which is really what their job is, right? I think not to actually coordinate paperwork. And that is actually a problem that is a lot of people are trying to tackle in the healthcare space, right? Now, which then brings me to my second key takeaway. The first key takeaway was that understanding unstructured data is key to solving organizational decision making. The second key takeaway is that context-aware AI applied to unstructured data breaks down the information barriers to human collaboration. So if I were to say, tell me the next frontier for Gen AI in the enterprise, I would say that the next frontier is collaboration. And how do we enable collaboration to happen better? Because we have to move beyond individual tasks to actually people collaborating with each other, right? And how do we enable that? How do we uncover the new pathways, and the new sources of value? So I've talked about two takeaways. Let's think about implementation, right? And when anytime an enterprise, let's say a CEO of a company comes to me and says, hey, I don't know where to start. Like I need to give them some sort of an anchor. How do we start thinking about this? Here is the value you can generate eventually, but maybe not all of it is going to happen immediately. So let's think about what is a staged approach towards actually implementing this, right? And how do we go about thinking about implementation? So with that, that introduces the notion of what we call the 3C framework, right? The path to being an AI-centered enterprise involves 3 C's: calibrate, clarify, and channelize. So let us go through each of these steps, right? What is calibrate? Calibrate is the kind of tool or model that might work best for your situation, right? And there's a lot of discussion on this. It's very important to understand that there is no single magic wand. We have to understand what is the right tool for the right problem, right? And how do we how do we start beginning to look at this question and trying to answer it? In our view, it really depends on this notion of precision of outcomes that you need, high versus low, and the data type that you have, which is structured or unstructured. All right. So let's talk about that a little more, right? So and once I give you the examples, it'll become very clear. So let's talk about structured data and low precision. So let's say you have some numbers, you have some Excel spreadsheets, you have some things on Tableau, and you want to start making decisions on sort of what might our sales look like. It is a relatively low precision answer. You've not really thrown a complex sort of, let's say, model at it at this point in time, but it's really looking at the structured data in some way and trying to sort of get some directional insights into where we are going. So it's very what I call as a low precision sort of output that you're expecting as the end of this process, but using primarily structured data, right? Financial investing, on the other hand, is a very high precision endeavor. You really want to narrow down sort of the variance around the kind of outcomes you want to get. There's going to be variance, but how much can we narrow it down? How much can we sort of come up with more precise numbers on exactly what we will make? And in any investment decision, right? Or how much do we need to spend, and how much do we actually make? So that is a very high precision exercise. That can also involve unstructured data increasingly, but primarily it's a structured data exercise. If it does involve unstructured data, we are in the next bucket, right? On the other hand, if you really want to just come up with the first draft of a marketing plan, this is what I would call, there are many different ways of doing it. There could be 3 different marketing plans that look exactly this, that conceptually speaking are not that different, but they're not verbatim the same. And that's pretty much what I would call a low precision outcome that you're trying to generate, but using essentially unstructured data, right? So because often a marketing plan involves different pieces of language and other kinds of unstructured data and sentiment that you want to incorporate into this draft, right? On the other hand, if you're doing extremely complex medical diagnosis, this involves not only the numbers that you generate from tests, but also all of the sort of patient information, notes that people gather, and all kinds of things. All the image data that you have, all the patient notes, all the descriptions of symptoms, all of that together. Now we want to really get things right, and there are many industrial exam equivalents of this as well. You really want to get things right, but then you're dealing with large amounts of unstructured data on top of the structured data, right? And that's what I would call as a high precision application with unstructured data. This then has implications for what kind of toolkit you might use, because now we can start thinking about exactly what tools to apply. If you're just thinking of low precision structured data, classical analytics, so which is basically using your Tableau dashboards, using your Excel spreadsheets, that works if all you want is low precision structured data, right? On the other hand, if you want high precision, this is stuff you've been doing for several years now. If you want high precision, obviously you want to apply classical ML, apply optimization, get high precision answers to questions, and actually deploy them, right? If all I want to do is generate a very first cut marketing plan, right, in a preliminary draft, and I have a broad leeway in terms of how it gets generated, I can just go with out of the box Gen AI. I can just say, okay, I can just go to ChatGPT and type things out, or maybe I have some sort of an in-house version of that, and I can just sort of say, okay, I can go in and I can ask a question and generate this, marketing plan, and I can keep going, right? So unstructured data, low precision is what I would call out of the box. You would need out of the box Gen AI. And then finally, when you start getting into high precision applications, when you're talking about how do I actually sort of compare what the this contract from the procurement person's perspective as well as the legal perspective, that's when you start needing context. You start needing to understand intent, and that's when we start getting into collaboration issues and so on. And that, of course, the tool readiness varies. We are still very early in the journey, right, of tool readiness in that context. But I think things are moving fast even there, right? In that, let's this is probably my most technical slide that I will actually show you in this entire talk, but I think it's very relevant because if you've been if you're like me and if you're interested in the topic of AI, your LinkedIn feed is, and if you're not, your LinkedIn feed is probably bombarded with this stuff. But let's clarify this a little bit, right? From our perspective, I think the key things here I want to talk about are, you know, what is the level of context awareness on unstructured data depending on the tools that you're using. If you're using out of the box Gen AI, oftentimes, if with unstructured data, it's the lowest level of context awareness. It doesn't understand your company, doesn't understand your role, doesn't understand a lot of things, but it can do a lot, right? It can do a lot even right there. The second level is what we call retrieval augmented generation, where we're thinking about getting chunks of data, right, and actually arranging them in a very particular pattern so that the large language model can actually sort of understand that very specific context and pattern and work with it. That's level 2. Level 3, well, I need something that's even more precise. So I want to take those chunks of data and I want to really start parsing it. And this requires a lot of effort, upfront effort, where you parse it, build detailed knowledge graphs, build the connectivity between different things that you would actually need. And this is where from a startup perspective, right? I think this is where I think you start thinking, okay, if I need to address this level of context awareness in my customer, in my large company that I'm working with, or even a small to medium-sized company I'm working with, I need to have the technological capability to build these things, right? So you build the knowledge graph, understand the connections between data points, and sort of start using that in this Gen AI context to really increase the level of context awareness. And then level 4 is of course agents, where you start thinking about how do you embody agents with reasoning, and what do these agents do? These agents work on the knowledge graph, on the chunks of data, and start, and they're orchestrated using large language models to actually execute on different tasks. So a lot of this talk about orchestration has come up recently. For example, Anthropic introduced the MCP architecture for agentic systems. All of this fits right here. The idea being that those orchestration systems can actually pick the right reasoning agent for the right problem and can actually sort of address. But then, of course, you also need to use it with the right level of data, right? The right context engineering, if you will, which is a term that is beginning to emerge. In fact, when we wrote the book, started writing the book about a year ago, I actually thought, this all seemed very futuristic. But today we are actually living it pretty much, right? Today, I mean, I'm beginning to see posts on, context engineering moving beyond, trying to figure out what is the right context we need to create for these models to actually work, right? All right, so and the many examples of the level 4 systems that are beginning to emerge. There is the generic versions like the GPT-o3 and it's that class of models. But there are also actual companies. So for example, the healthcare company that I was talking about was Qventus, which actually enables nurses to come up with pre-operative plans. So that's an example of that. My own company, Summit, we're trying to tackle it in sort of the more in the sort of supply chain space, starting off with that space, thinking about demand planning, thinking about procurement, those kinds of areas, but really creating the level of context awareness you need to solve certain problems. All right, so I talked about the 3 C's. The first step is essentially of course calibrate. Clarification is basically this is mapping out. So whenever senior leadership in an organization comes to me, my point is, you need to understand what are the different value-adding activities in your organization and map them to into the strategic importance, and then we'll then calibrate them to the right level of technology, right? And then finally, we want to channelize, and I'll explain this idea of stage gating different steps with a figure. So the idea is that depending on sort of the strategic importance of a use case and the tool readiness, you want to map those things to actually come up with a plan of action. And sometimes the answer could just be, it's low in strategic importance, tools are not ready. Let's just use conventional technology. Let's just do what we are doing right now. I'm not saying that using Gen AI based tools is the answer for everything, right? And at the same time, right, if it's high in strategic importance and whether the tools are ready or not, I think as an organization you need to start thinking ahead. How can we start with steps today to actually get to that end game, right? But getting to that end game is not about just the long term. If there is a relatively low impact use case, it could be something like, hey, can I get my employees to search through my HR policy documents better, right? And help enable them to, to understand their, the policies that govern them. It may not, from an organizational standpoint, it's not the highest on your list, but at the same time, it's something that the tools are actually available to do this right away, right? And those are very important also, because those are potential quick wins. When you can enable those quick wins, people can, you build. I think the most important thing in a transformation process is culture. You can actually start building culture in an organization that can to using these tools, and that can pave your path to actually sort of like using the more sophisticated tools as they come along in the more longer term high impact applications. So the way, as a company, the way I think about when I talk to people, like, this is the way I think about sort of like the value delivery roadmap. I say, yes, the long-term goal is, collaboration and reasoning embedded in that collaboration, right? But we start with tasks, but we very quickly start moving into elevating interaction quality. And then that eventually allows you to start discovering new value pathways. So when teams get together and the AI enables free information transfer, they can discover new ideas, new pathways that were never possible before, and that allows you to sort of like be creative, innovate, and move that innovation roadmap for the company along a lot faster. Right? All right, and that's my third takeaway, which is calibrate, clarify, channelize framework provides a roadmap towards an AI-centered enterprise via the implementation of context-aware AI, right? So if I were to summarize my three takeaways here, understanding context based on unstructured data is a very, very crucial, right, for organizational decision making. And next frontier is human collaboration. And how do you implement that framework? There is the calibrate, clarify, channelize framework that we have that we can actually implement this. And the idea here is to actually have a nuanced, methodical approach to actually implementing these tools and moving towards becoming an AI-centered enterprise, right? So that's really the end goal in many ways. I want to close with a couple of things. I do want to, there are two things here. Our product is primarily focused. Summit is focused on supply chains, and we are doing enterprise implementations. But I do want to give early access to individuals to do their own work. So feel free to sort of like to sign up, and I'll give access. We'll be giving access in batches. I'm just going to give you a very quick snapshot of what the product actually looks like, just to give you what the look and feel looks like. Just a 1 minute to do that. And then, of course, if you're interested in the book, it was released just this week, and it is already a bestseller in many of these categories. I think this QR code takes you to sort of like the Amazon the Amazon US website, but but it is available in Amazon and other countries as well. Let me quickly show you what that might actually look like in a minute, and then I'll be happy to take questions. So if you click that link, this is what you will see. And if you can sign in with one of your Google accounts. For initially, of course, I'll have to give you access to it. It is request permission for access. What's the future, right? How are these tools going to look? So essentially, you can start asking questions right away in a generic search format, but you can also then start uploading different kinds of documents, creating workspaces around these documents, right? And start having chats with these documents, which will actually allow you to solve problems. And then you can start sharing this with others as well and collaborating, right, with people. So for instance, this is a complex sort of like these are complex logistics documents where I'm trying to understand exactly sort of like, what contract should I pick? So for example, I can say, hey, I want to minimize my shipping costs. What contract should I pick? And then you can actually sort of like, it'll give you a very detailed analysis of exactly how you should be comparing these contracts and what your final recommendation should be, right? It also uses agents. So you can start, you can have agents that can do all kinds of things, generate insights, do reporting, do web search, and sort of in your context, specify your individual context to actually do these things, right? And so this is something that I would definitely, and I'm looking for your feedback. If you can play around with it, give us your feedback on how useful it was to you. It's free to use at the moment. I would love it. Right?
All
So
right.
that's what I want to end with. Yeah, Vaibhav. Yeah.
Totally in time. We still have 15 minutes for Q&A. Thanks a lot for your fantastic talk. We have a couple of questions. So without wasting any time, let me start with a question from Devdutt, from Canada. In fact, he also participated recently in our executive education program. So he's asking, so Perplexity recently released a Comet, you know, kind of context aware. So would it be useful to get comments? He would like to get some comments from the panel on it. But of course, we are not going to seek comments from others. Maybe you can comment on, Perplexity or ChatGPT's agentic AI are and how context aware they are, and where they are going forward too. So maybe that would be useful for others as well to understand. Yeah.
So I think the important thing is there are different directions that companies are coming from. I would say, and I was on a like a VC panel just just this earlier this week, and this question came up, right? So there are two ends of the spectrum. There is the people who are working on the foundation models, and there are the incumbent companies, let's say a Salesforce or any other ERP company, right? Now, the foundation model companies, the way they are becoming more context aware and trying to even enter enterprise is they're coming from a very generic pathway. So initially, it's all about consumer use cases, agents that can tackle consumer use cases and actually do a lot of that work. But they're also trying to get into like the more enterprise. They're trying to say, okay, can I get into your enterprise data? If we can figure out exactly how to make sense of that. Then you have sort of like the Salesforce and the other sort of like the entire set of companies which are basically have an existing very vertical sort of offering, and they are trying to add like AI layers or agentic layers on top of that, right? Now, the question that was asked is, and this question also I think answers the question. It also answers the question for a startup. The question that was asked is, how does a startup navigate this? If I'm a startup building in a vertical AI space, how do I compete with these heavyweights? I mean, you have the foundation model companies, you have the ERP companies, and the Salesforce and all of that. How do I compete? The important thing to remember is that no one's going to be able to do everything. I think it's not. It is. If there is anything that is, I for one, and I will sort of like put a stake in the ground here. I'm not a big believer in this notion of enterprise AGI or artificial general intelligence. It's going to be very, very different. If you talk to companies, when I talk to managers, I talk to executives, it is very clear that the range of problems that people have, and some of these are collaboration problems, some of these are like human problems. You cannot tackle all of those problems with AI in one fell swoop. So there is always going to be that space. Yes, there are going to be the large companies trying to do this, but I think as a startup, I think it's very important for you for a startup to be very focused on your customer. For me, it's always about what specific pain point that I can solve for this executive that I'm talking to, right? And when you understand that level of, you have that level of customization, I think it is different. So yes, those tools all have value, but I think there is a lot of room for building very specific applications and addressing specific needs as well.
Thanks. Rishi.
I'll take the next question from Venkata Pingle, our 96 batch BTech computer science graduate. What is the process of construction of the organizational context? It is today distributed in people, processes, and documents. Is there a single context? How do you know that whatever context you construct is accurate?
So let's talk about I wouldn't say it's a single context. I think that there is a mass of data, and we need to do you know create sort of like a context for a particular application. So the way, at least I see this unfolding is, but the important thing to remember is there is the agility. I think the idea is I want to work on a demand planning application. Can I put together exactly which piece of data I need to actually like make that happen, right? So, and today I think with the tools we have, whether it is the so-called wipe to coding tools, where it's essentially coding in an autonomous way, or and the ability to the technology we have at our disposal, I think it's possible to create context very dynamically, from that larger mass of data, which can address specific applications. So I don't think there is a single context. Context has to be created, in a dynamic way. And I think the key differentiator is going to be how quickly can we do this, right? So I think speed in sort of creating these dynamic contexts is going to be very important. Accuracy. Now, this is the trickier one. Now, I think I really think that the only way to determine accuracy, and it sort of goes back to this idea of like what I mentioned earlier, is if I am working on a particular kind of like application, with having that degree of proximity to the customer and ensuring that we are doing we are pulling in the right data sources and putting in, one is the data sources, the input. The second part is the output. I mean, we want to control hallucinations. We want to control have accuracy. Putting in the right sort of like safeguards in the agents that we build is going to be important. I've seen, we can say all we want about and again, I think the tools help us get faster, but I think, closeness to the customer you're working with, closeness to sort of the application is critical. That is in some ways, as I said, right, that closeness is what is difficult to get when you're a large foundational model organization. I think if you have as working closely with a specific vertical with a set of customers, I think it really makes a very big difference in determining exactly what guardrails you need to put.
Great. Thanks. And I see there is another question from Nitin, ITB81. So Nitin is asking, well, I also have similar kind of question. Rather, I will build on his question. So his question is, any thoughts on AI-centered private individuals? So private individual means individual in general, along the lines of AI-centered enterprise. And to adding on that, my question would be, do you think AI-centered individuals would create AI-centered enterprises? Or maybe somebody who is not that AI centered could also go forward and create AI centered enterprises. Yeah, just that's a question from my end as well. Yeah.
So I don't know what an AI. I mean, I would say, but I guess what I'm assuming is that an AI centered individual in this case is somebody who uses AI tools to like sort of pretty much
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
make their lives like super productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's I think to some extent we're already getting there, right? I think that I think the reason we wrote a book on the AI-centered enterprise is because is because that is the harder one to create. I think we are going to see plenty of AI-centered individuals. They probably are already there. I'm not AI-centered individual completely, but I'm probably halfway there. Others are probably way more. They're always on top of the latest tools and ensuring that their work, whatever they're doing, they get done faster. AI-centered enterprises are harder simply because I think it involves human interaction, human collaboration. That's a more challenging problem to solve, and that's why I call it the next frontier in many ways. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, then. Next question is from Ajay Deshpande, IITB 96 MTech CS. Can you please comment on the financial aspects of starting up an AI company for specific enterprise situations? I presume we'll need to build and run specialized LLMs.
So I don't think you need specialized LLMs. If you think about the architecture that we're talking about, I think the idea is to build agents on top, provide the right context and give the right create the right agents on top of it, right? You can do some fine tuning and create your own version of the LLM as well, but I think I strongly advise anyone against reinventing the wheel as a starting company. I think if you grow and you become large, you can start building your own LLM. Building an LLM from scratch is hard. Yes, there is some data you can fine tune on. I would say use as much as you can of the LLMs that already exist and build agentic architectures on top of that. Now, the only difference I would say is, so the foundation model companies are already there. Now, the difference I would say is that sometimes your customers may actually come in and say, look, we don't want you to use like a proprietary LLM. there are ways of sandboxing even those, like, in the sense you can create walls around those, create ensure that your data never goes back to sort of like the proprietary model companies, even with those LLMs. There are ways to do that, but if you really want to play it safe, there are plenty of open source options, and those open source options can also be they're also they're also pretty good, like a Mistral or a Llama, and you can create your own versions of that, right? I would definitely stay away from, like, the foundational tech too much, unless you want to fine tuning is fine, but I think focus more on sort of the right context and the creating the right agent architectures on top of it. That's my take.
Great. Thanks. So I see there is another question uh, from Devdutt. So maybe you can, briefly talk about it. So he's mentioning doubts plus curiosity, which humans have, are the foundations of creating knowledge. So, is AI moving in that direction? So what do you think about it?
So there are two differing viewpoints of this, right? So there is obviously there's some literature emerging that AI is making us dumber, but there is also some evidence that AI is making us smarter. So this then becomes like a, makes this like so the question is, which one is right? I would say it's all about how you use it. I think if the goal is, I think the goal is primarily to sort of, hey, I want to just, cheat and not actually do any real work, then obviously, like, it makes us dumber. But if the goal is, I want to actually use this as a teammate, as a almost like, all I need is an analyst who can work with me to, like, work with me to sort of expand my thinking capacity or thinking space. Then it's going to make you better, because it's and there's I can point out, I forget the name of the Stanford professor who's actually done some work on this. He actually has these things on how do you use even as an individual, how do you use chat GPT better, right? Or not just use it in a very passive way to just do things, but actually enable your creativity, right? And your own creativity by sort of almost acting like a sounding board, right? So I think it's a matter of how you use it, your initial perspective, and how you actually use it. I would definitely vouch for the second, which is basically like, use it in a way that can enhance you, as opposed to using it as a way to cut corners.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next question is from Onkar Mukherjee, IIT Bombay 2005 MTech Earth Sciences. Calibrate refers to the tools. Clarify refers to strategy. Could you please elaborate a little more about the channelized aspect of the pathway?
Right. So I think the channelized aspect of the pathway is you're absolutely right. Calibrators tools clarifies the strategy and what is the strategic importance, but channelized is the actual time-based implementation, right? And also the kind of sort of it involves questions like, the strategy simply tells you how, figuring out what is important for me as an organization, but the how is still important. A how would be, what should I do first, right? And that, again, I told you, like, that depending on the tools you have available, you might do first. And do I build or do I buy? So in the sense, from a large organization perspective, and I say large, I mean, I don't mean necessarily the largest organizations, but somebody who's not every organization is going to be a tech company building these AI tools, right? Some of the large companies actually have internal teams who can build it, and maybe not in all areas. But most companies are not going to have those. So then the question is, should we just buy? Should we just get into a partnership? It's answering those kinds of questions, which is the more detailed how, which is that once I know that this is my strategy, once I know that these are the tools to get there, should I buy versus build? Should I, what should I do first? And what are the details of implementing it? And what do I need to watch out for? What are the guardrails I need to put, for example? Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. So, unfortunately, we are almost there. So, if you have any more questions, so I've put in the kind of link to the LinkedIn post. Maybe you can post your questions in the chat, in the comment there, and probably Ram would respond. He's quite active on LinkedIn. Because of course, the time is kind of it's almost ending. So we don't want it to shoot more. But anyways, thanks a lot, Professor Ram, for this fantastic talk. I'm sure it was useful to a lot of people, especially people who are building in this space. And of course, so as I mentioned, I'll write to you and see if we can have more synergies in terms of teaching and research and otherwise. Anyways, these recordings are also shared with people, so they may try to reach out to you. So what would be the
Absolutely.
best way to reach out to you? Via your email, I guess, right?
Yeah, my university email is best. I think that's my general
Okay,
purpose of like, I get into, yeah, I'm always happy to respond to, I always end up responding to people. So it's like, it's, I never, it's that part of my mission is to sort of, is advocacy and talking about these issues. So yeah.
great. Thanks a lot. And
Would you
anyways,
like to?
I'll also request you for the slides if you could share, because a couple of people also
Yeah,
wrote to me. If you
absolutely.
could share your slide, that would be very useful. Rishi, you
Sure.
had something?
Yeah, just could you post your email here in the chat for people? And then
Yeah,
I'll
yeah. It's
also
also on the
share it.
slides, but yeah, of
Yeah,
course, but I
I
can.
will
Okay.
share the slides, and it has the last page has, and anyways, I shared the
Yeah,
post, so his LinkedIn profile is also open, so people can always write to him. Yeah,
yeah.
thanks a lot.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sure.
yeah, thanks a lot, Ram, for this fantastic talk. See you soon.
Yeah.
Bye bye,
Sounds good. Thank
everyone.
you.
In time,
Yeah.
exactly in time. Bye bye.